I'm going to talk today about random monsters because I think that you can use random monsters in your homebrewed campaign to increase the realism of your world, to forward the storytelling, and to increase the possibilities for role play and creative encounter management. Yes, I just used the term creative encounter management. Hello again, I'm KR King, and this is my YouTube channel dedicated to homebrewing a campaign. I love random monsters. When used judiciously, I think they really enhance the realism of your world, and they give you and your players a chance to stretch creatively. The thing to remember when you're using random monsters is to think about them in terms of game mechanics and storytelling. Think about how they work into the idea of a living world with terrain or dungeons or underdark or whatever, different areas. What sort of things would be wandering there? And then think of ways that you can tie them into your storylines when appropriate. So in terms of the game mechanics, what I like to think about is resource usage, or resource burn as people sometimes say. Terrain effects, that is, where do the monsters live in your world. The usage of lairs as both a way for treasure distribution and for information distribution. And also a chance for GM and player improvisation. So as a GM, a random monster is just that. You hadn't planned on it, you just rolled it on a table, now you've got to come up with something. And for your players as well, they may have some mission that they want to achieve. This random monster is either going to get in the way or they're going to get information out of it, etc. But they have an opportunity to play this without any thought or any preparation. They just have to improvise as they go along. So really, resource usage is just the fact that when you're out in the wilderness or down in the dungeon, you're living off the land, and your resource attrition is much higher and more precarious than it is than when you're in town. And the fact that you might run into some monster out in the wilderness or down in the dungeon just reflects that. So if you think of a real life adventure, if you're going to climb Mount Everest or K2, you're going to have a much higher resource usage than if you're just climbing some minor mountain, right? You've got a much narrower margin for error there in terms of storms, avalanche, accidents. You've got other climbers getting sick or having an accident or whatever. So again, this is just like when in Dungeons and Dragons, you go out into the world, into a difficult terrain, into a place that's especially nasty, your margin for error is very small. And the random monsters in that area are just another aspect of that. You're always preparing for random events when you climb Mount Everest. That's the thing you worry about. Well, it's the same thing when you go out adventuring. So if you want that realism in your world, you'll have those wandering monsters. If they are going through the wilderness, if they are going through an area that is going to have nasty things in it, you're doing your world a disservice. You're adding to an unrealistic aspect when you don't have any sort of random monsters. If you're watching a movie about people climbing Mount Everest, you expect there to be unexpected things, random events that occur on the thing. If it's all just went smooth as silk, who cares? Also, there can be random events climbing Mount Everest when it was very lucky. Same thing in the world. You meet some random monster that actually helps you. Now, sometimes people will say, well, how come certain terrain has more monsters than others? Is it just their proximity to settlements? Why are coastal hexes so much less deadly than, say, mountain or swamp? Part of this may just be, the fantasy novels that typically had horrific places in dismal areas. But also there's just a certain algorithm, a probability of monsters. Some areas have very few, most have kind of the middle amount, and then a very few at the other end have a lot of monsters. And this is easily represented in geography, right? As you wander the wilderness, as you go deeper into dungeons. So it's a game mechanic, but it's one that works. It's one that players will accept if presented in a realistic fashion. So if you're hanging around at the farm and a giant bear attacks, you're going to be shocked. You're going to go, what is this? Unless they heard about a giant bear wandering in the world. Another mechanic that wandering monsters are great is for treasure distribution or information. They live somewhere in the world, and the players can track them back to the lair and find out what's there. Now, in terms of GM improvisation, sometimes we forget the GM is a player in the game. They're going along with the players. This world is being created organically. And by having a random monster, it sort of hones your improvisational skills that are very critical to running a successful campaign. You didn't expect this monster, you have to make decisions. Is it a one-off? Am I going to plug it into some existing thing that I already have? Or am I going to try to create a new storyline on the fly? The thing is, you want to get good at this. You want to get so that the players don't even notice that it's a random monster. Or if they do, they go, oh, look at the way he tied this into an existing thing, and they'll like that. Now, in terms of storytelling, the sort of biblical text of D&D, which is Tolkien's books, have basically the first random monster, the trolls in The Hobbit, right? Bilbo runs into them, and then the other dwarves come, and they're basically rescued at the end by Gandalf. Yes, I know that wasn't quite how it worked out, but, that's the best I can do. Then they go and find the troll's lair. They find the pots of gold, and importantly, they find the weapons. Bilbo gets Sting, the orc-slaying blade, and they're sort of like, what are these doing here? Where have these trolls been? And it ties into the story. Now, obviously, Tolkien's writing a book here. It's a different process because he's creating everything, whereas when you're doing D&D, the players are contributing. But you give opportunities to give information. You might give them a map in a lair that leads to something that they know nothing about. They might not be able to figure it out, or they might be on another mission right now, storyline, they can't check it out, but they save it. They have, this is interesting. You can also provide information, unexpected information about some aspect of a story that they're working on right now. Why shouldn't it be in the lair? Monsters collect treasure. They have their victims, often monsters that don't care about the lair. They just take whatever it is. And so again, if you want to distribute some gems or jewels or that sort of thing, just as they did in The Hobbit. Now, what I think random monsters can really encourage role-playing, because oftentimes the characters don't necessarily want to fight these monsters. Is there any way to negotiate? What first might seem like a hostile encounter through clever role-playing can turn into at least a neutral run, and possibly one that's more positive towards the players. There are creatures we think of as traditionally hostile or evil, but are they all the time? I think this is one of the issues with alignment is it sets everyone in a box, and just as people are different, the various NPCs and monsters are different as well. Can your players take a tact when they run into a random monster where they don't have to have the hack and slash, who's surprised? Okay, roll initiative, right? They can hide from them or try to escape. And don't forget, random monsters can try to run away, right? They might be outnumbered. So you'll have the random monster roll. They'll learn something. Oh, there's X or Y in the area, but it doesn't slow things down. They keep moving. And their role-playing also lets the players know, I can navigate through this world like a real world. It's not a video game with only one or two options. I can use my skills, whether it's character-based or just as a player, to try to have a different outcome that's not necessarily just combat. And typically, when you don't kill someone, you get more information out of them. That's the other thing about random monsters that's so great. They provide information. They live in the area. They know things about this area. So when you defeat them, if you don't necessarily kill them, you can find out information. And certainly if you don't have battle with them, you can find information as well. If a lair is an abandoned structure from some past tenant, there's more information. There's some historical stuff that can be tied into other things. There might be things that the monsters that occupied the lair had no interest in. And yet when the players go there, what is this, right? Look at this painting on the wall. Look at this statue. Look at this, look at that. So the information aspect with Wandering Monsters, you plug that in. So there's a lot of random monster generators on the internet, and a lot of times they go by the CR rating. Now there's issues with the CR rating that I realize. I'm not going to go into that here. You always have to modify that to a certain extent. But they do give you a list of monsters based upon the size of your group and the CR that you can work with. Again, sometimes I think these tend to go to the video game thing a little bit where it's always going to be combat. If you look back way in the past, they used to have things like pilgrims, as a wandering monster. Now again, would that occur in the middle of a swamp? I don't know. But you still had much clearer opportunities for either negotiation, role-playing, or just things running away. So a lot of these charts just create clear battle encounters. The other thing that they sometimes do is they give you a random monster that makes no sense for the terrain or the monster. So you always have to watch out for that. So I'm going to use one that I found on the internet, and then I'm going to see how this works. So when I first rolled this up, I said I had a party with 4 members at 3rd level, and I was in the forest. So we look here, and I've rolled 1 mummy. Now, this is a little problematic for me because traditionally mummies are bound to some place. They've been put in a tomb. There's some kind of curse. They have a mummy lord. Why would one single mummy be wandering through the forest? It doesn't really make sense. Now, you could just say it escaped from some tomb somewhere else and has been wandering around, and the players come across it and put it out of its misery. Okay. Or you could say, well, in fact, I have a special, this mummy's tomb that I'd had written up, and it was supposed to be in this desert over here, but I'll plop it down in this forest and away we go. You can do that if you want, if it doesn't tie in too directly. Or you can just create something on the fly. This forest, there was some, temple here or some person here or whatever, and you create mummies, and this guy escaped for some reason. He was released or whatever. Again, you have to be creative. You have to improvise. Why would this mummy be wandering into the woods? But suppose I say to myself, I don't want it. You know what? One mummy, so I'm going to go again. So this time I roll up 7 bullywugs. Okay, so there's a chance they would be in this forest. They're sort of swampy, but I can have a little area of swamp near this thing. And then I have to decide, okay, are they just 7 bullywugs? This is their whole tribe, right? The king and the queen, if you look into their monster description. I know I said 7 bullywugs. There's only 4, but, I'm limited on my special effects budget. So they're just wandering and then they attack the players. Or the players negotiate with them. Maybe the players, 4 third level characters might scare them or what. It depends on what the players do. Or if you've got some bullywug village that you would set up, I don't know, maybe you have, well, then you plug it in. It's pretty logical right here. Or the final thing, and probably the most realistic, is if you want to improvise a bullywug village. They've got a king and a queen. How many more are there back at home? Or, are they an offshoot? Maybe they're having a feud with their old bullywug village. These are the 7 outsiders that left. They have a reason not necessarily to want to get in a fight. Maybe they want the players to help them out. Maybe it's an evil king that took over, the son of the good king in terms of the bullywugs, and they want to help him. I mean, there's a million ways to do this when you just don't think of it as, okay, roll initiative, let's fight. You think of ways that you as the GM can improvise, and then you let the players, if it appears that the bullywugs maybe don't want to attack right away, what do the players do? Do they make an attempt to speak with them? Whatever. This is where the random monsters are so great, because now if you make friends or at least uneasy allies or something with the bullywugs, they're going to give you information about this place. Maybe information that's going to help you on some quest you're going on as you go through the forest to avoid trouble or something, other monsters. Or they become allies in some strange way. And who would have thought that you would become allies with these bullywugs? You might be the only ones. Very helpful, very interesting. And it all comes out of just, on this table, I rolled 7 bullywugs. I got to figure it out. So there you go. When you think of random monsters, think in terms of the game mechanics, why they're there, what they represent in terms of the difficulties of traversing different areas, what they offer the players in terms of lair opportunities, information, treasure distribution, and finally the aspects of role-playing, having encounters that are out of the box and different than the ones you might think of. This is the great thing about D&D and the storytelling aspects. You're taking these NPCs and monsters out of the book, you're playing them under certain constraints, but then the rest is up to you as the GM and your players. So, I hope you liked it. Please subscribe if you can. Give me some comments. Tell me what you think about random monsters. Have you had some great random monster encounters as a player, as a GM? What are the things that bug you about them? I know there's a lot of people that have their issues with them. In the meantime, keep playing D&D and tell somebody else about it.